The Valley of Fear, 1915, Episode 4. The Scowrers' Reign of Terror. Welcome back, fellow detectives. In our previous episodes, you've witnessed a murder that wasn't what it seemed, a locked room mystery that concealed a desperate man's escape plan, and the shadow of the Scowrers, a mysterious organization from America that pursued John Douglas across an ocean. Today, we journey back 20 years into the past, to a dark valley in Pennsylvania where evil men built an empire on fear and blood. Have you ever wondered what could drive a man to flee his homeland and live in constant terror for decades? Prepare yourself, because the true horror of this case doesn't lie in an English manor house, but in the coal mines of Vermissa Valley, where justice died and terror reigned supreme. Picture yourself opening a worn leather journal discovered hidden in Douglas's study after the truth came out. The pages are yellowed with age, written in a cramped, urgent hand that speaks of fear and desperation. My name is not John Douglas. The first entry reads, I was born Jack McMurdo in Chicago, and this is the story of how I became a hunted man and why I can never truly escape the Valley of Fear. The journal transports you back to 1875 to a young man of 25 arriving in a bleak mining town called Vermissa in the coal regions of Pennsylvania. Jack McMurdo steps off the train into a world of soot-blackened buildings, muddy streets, and the constant rumble of mine operations that shake the ground like distant thunder. Can you imagine the harsh reality of life in these mining communities, where men descended into darkness each day, not knowing if they'd return? Vermissa looked like hell's waiting room, McMurdo writes. Everywhere I turned, I saw the same haunted expressions on miners' faces, not the exhaustion of hard work, but the fear of men living under constant threat. I didn't understand it then. I thought I was clever, coming to this valley to make my fortune. I had no idea I was walking into a nightmare. McMurdo finds lodging in a boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Shafter and her daughter Etty. Young Etty is beautiful despite the grim surroundings, with a warmth that seems impossible in such a dark place. But when McMurdo mentions he's looking for work in the mines, he notices something strange. Etty's face goes pale with fear. Please, she whispers, glancing around nervously, find work somewhere else, anywhere else this valley. There's something evil here. Good men come to Vermissa and lose their souls, or worse, lose their lives. Her genuine concern touches McMurdo, but he laughs it off as feminine nervousness. How little he understands about the terror that rules this place. On his second day in Vermissa, McMurdo visits a saloon to gather information about mining jobs. The place is crowded with rough men drinking heavily, despite the early hour. At the bar, he strikes up a conversation with a powerfully built man who introduces himself as Jack McGinty, the owner of the saloon, and, as McMurdo soon learns, the most feared man in the valley. In the new to Vermissa, are you? McGinty asks with a smile that doesn't reach his cold eyes. Looking for work in the mines? McMurdo nods enthusiastically, not noticing how the other men in the saloon have fallen silent, watching this exchange with intense interest. Well, friend, work can be arranged. But first, tell me, are you a member of the ancient order of freemen? Here's where you need to pay attention, detective. The ancient order of freemen was the public face of the Scowrers, as supposedly legitimate lodge providing support for workers. But beneath that respectable surface lurked something far more sinister. How would you have responded to McGinty's question, not knowing what organization you were really being asked about? McMurdo, eager to fit in and remembering that his father had been a member of the Freemen back in Chicago, proudly displays a lodge membership card he'd inherited McGinty's eyes light up with satisfaction. A brother from Lodge 29 in Chicago. Well, you'll find the Vermissa Lodge very welcoming. We take care of our own here, and we deal harshly with those who aren't our own. That evening, McMurdo is invited to attend a meeting of the Vermissa Lodge. He expects a routine fraternal gathering, perhaps some ritual ceremony, discussion of mutual aid for workers, maybe a social afterward. What he discovers instead chills him to the bone and changes his life forever. The lodge meets in a back room of McGinty's saloon, accessed through a hidden door. 50 rough men crowd the space, their faces hard and suspicious. At the front sits Jack McGinty in an ornate chair like a throne, flanked by officers of the lodge. But this is no ordinary meeting. McMurdo realizes with growing horror that he's stumbled into the headquarters of a criminal organization. "Brothers," McGinty begins, his voice carrying absolute authority, "we have business to discuss tonight. The mine foreman Jenkins has been asking too many questions about the accident that killed Tom Williams last month. He needs to understand that curiosity is dangerous in Vermissa Valley." The casual way he discusses murder makes McMurdo's blood run cold. A man named Ted Baldwin, yes, the same Ted Baldwin who would one day become the assassin at Burlstone Manor, stands up eagerly. "I'll take care of Jenkins, Bodymaster. Give me 2 men, and it'll look like a mining accident. No one will question it." McGinty nods approvingly. "Good, make it look convincing. We can't have the authorities getting suspicious." McMurdo sits frozen, unable to believe what he's hearing. These men are discussing murder as casually as others might discuss the weather. Around him, lodge members nod in agreement, some even looking eager to participate in the violence. Can you imagine the terror of realizing you've accidentally joined a society of killers? "We have another matter," McGinty continues. "The owner of the Herald newspaper has been writing editorials calling for investigation of violence in the coal fields. He thinks he's safe because he's not a miner, but he needs to learn that no one in this valley crosses the Scowrers and lives." The name sends a visible shudder through the room. The Scowrers, the inner circle of the most violent members. An older member speaks up. "Bodymaster, if we kill a newspaper owner, won't that bring too much attention from outside? Federal marshals might come investigating." McGinty's laugh is harsh. "Let them come. We own the local police, the judges, even the politicians. Any marshal who comes to Vermissa will find witnesses suddenly unable to remember anything, or he'll end up at the bottom of a mine shaft." The meeting reveals the full extent of the Scowrers' power and brutality. They control every aspect of life in Vermissa Valley through systematic terror. Mine owners who don't pay protection money have their equipment sabotaged and their workers intimidated. Foremen who try to improve safety conditions are beaten or killed. Anyone who speaks to authorities disappears mysteriously. The organization has created a kingdom of fear where justice cannot exist. McMurdo's journal describes his internal struggle that night. "I realized I was trapped. If I showed horror or tried to leave the lodge, they'd kill me as a potential informant. If I stayed and participated, I'd become one of them, a murderer, hiding behind fraternal brotherhood. I made a decision that would haunt me for the rest of my life. I would pretend to be one of them while secretly gathering evidence to destroy them." Over the following weeks, McMurdo carefully builds his reputation within the Scowrers. He volunteers for increasingly dangerous assignments, proving his loyalty through actions that make him sick to his soul. But each time he secretly documents everything: names, dates, crimes, the organizational structure. He's building a case that could bring down the entire network. His relationship with Etty Shafter grows deeper, providing his only source of light in this darkness. She confesses to him one evening, "My father was killed by the Scowrers when I was 12. He witnessed the murder, a mine inspector, and refused to lie for them. They made it look like a mining accident. But I knew the truth. That's why I warned you to leave Vermissa. This valley destroys everyone who comes here." McMurdo wants to tell her about his secret mission, but he can't risk it. The Scowrers have informants everywhere. One careless word and both he and Etty would end up dead. So he carries his terrible burden alone, becoming increasingly involved in the organization's crimes while documenting each atrocity. The journal describes specific incidents that reveal the Scowrers' methods. A mine owner named Josiah Dunn refuses to pay protection money. 2 nights later, dynamite destroys his office and home. When he still refuses, his teenage son is beaten so severely he loses the use of his legs. Dunn finally pays, broken and defeated. This is how the Scowrers maintain control, not just through violence, but through the threat of violence against loved ones. Another entry describes the murder of a detective sent from Philadelphia to investigate the violence. The Scowrers learned of his arrival within hours. Their network of informants extended far beyond the valley. They ambushed him on a dark road, made his death look like a robbery, and the case was quickly closed. No other detectives came afterward. The message was clear. Vermissa Valley was beyond the law's reach. Think about this, detective. How do you fight an organization that controls everything, police, judges, witnesses, when violence is met with overwhelming counter-violence and justice itself has been corrupted? McMurdo faced this impossible situation, knowing one mistake would mean death. Jack McGinty takes a particular interest in McMurdo, seeing him as a promising recruit for the inner circle of Scowrers. "You've got nerve, McMurdo," McGinty tells him during a private meeting. "You don't hesitate when violence is needed. I'm making you an officer of the lodge. You'll lead operations now." This promotion, while terrifying, gives McMurdo access to the organization's most guarded secrets. But success brings danger. Ted Baldwin, who coveted the officer position McMurdo received, becomes violently jealous. Baldwin is also in love with Etty and sees McMurdo as a rival on 2 fronts. "You watch yourself, Chicago boy," Baldwin warns him. "Accidents happen in the mines, even to Scowrers who get too big for their britches." The tension between McMurdo and Baldwin escalates into a confrontation that nearly turns deadly. At a lodge meeting, Baldwin publicly accuses McMurdo of being too soft, of hesitating during a recent operation. It's a direct challenge to McMurdo's loyalty and courage. McGinty watches the exchange with interest, clearly testing McMurdo's response. McMurdo knows he must respond decisively or be suspected. In a moment that he describes as surrendering the last piece of his soul, he volunteers to lead the most dangerous operation the Scowrers have planned: the assassination of a crusading police captain named Marvin, who's been building evidence against the organization. The lodge erupts in approval, and Baldwin is forced to back down. But McMurdo has a secret plan. Instead of killing Captain Marvin, he arranges a clandestine meeting and reveals everything: his true identity, his documentation of Scowrers' crimes, and the entire organizational structure. "I've been gathering evidence for months," McMurdo tells the shocked captain. "I can give you everything you need to destroy them, but we have to act fast before they suspect anything." Captain Marvin contacts the Pinkerton Detective Agency, famous for their work against criminal organizations. They send their best agent, a man named Birdie Edwards, to coordinate with McMurdo's evidence. Together, they plan a massive raid that will arrest the entire Scowrers leadership. Simultaneously, preventing any members from escaping or destroying evidence. The journal describes the terrible tension of those final weeks. McMurdo must continue participating in Scowrers activities while knowing that every day brings the raid closer. He must smile and joke with men he's helping to condemn to prison. Ted Baldwin's suspicions grow stronger. Something about McMurdo doesn't add up, and Baldwin's criminal instincts are telling him there's a traitor in their midst. Finally, the trap is set. A major Scowrers meeting is scheduled where all the leadership will be present to plan their most ambitious operation yet. The complete takeover of the valley's political structure through intimidation and murder. McMurdo ensures that every detail of the meeting location and timing is passed to Captain Marvin and the Pinkertons. On the night of the raid, McMurdo sits among the 50 Scowrers gathered in McGinty's saloon, listening to them plan atrocities, knowing that armed lawmen are surrounding the building at that very moment. Can you imagine the fear that the raid might fail, that he might be discovered at the last moment, that violence might erupt and innocents could die? Jack McGinty is in the middle of a speech about their glorious future when the doors burst open and Pinkerton agents flood in with weapons drawn. "You're all under arrest for murder, extortion, and terrorism," Captain Marvin shouts. The Scowrers reach for weapons, but they're outnumbered and surrounded. The reign of terror is over in a matter of minutes. The aftermath is chaos. Ted Baldwin, seeing McMurdo unrestrained by the Pinkertons, realizes the truth in an instant. You're the traitor. You sold us out." He lunges for McMurdo with murder in his eyes, but the agents subdue him. As Baldwin is dragged away in chains, he screams, "I'll kill you, McMurdo. If it takes me 20 years, I'll hunt you down and put a bullet in your head. You're a dead man." The trial that follows becomes national news. McMurdo testifies for days, revealing every detail of the Scowrers operations. His documentation is so thorough that the defense has no chance. Jack McGinty and 19 other leaders are sentenced to death. Ted Baldwin and 30 more receive long prison sentences. The ancient order of freemen is disbanded, its charter revoked, its property seized. But McMurdo's victory comes at a terrible price. The journal's final entries from this period are heartbreaking. "I've destroyed the Scowrers, but I've also destroyed myself. I can never return to Chicago. Surviving Scowrers know my name and face. I can never use the name Jack McMurdo again. And Etty, my beautiful Etty, refuses to marry a man who lived a lie, even for a good cause. She says she can never trust again after seeing how completely I deceived everyone." The Pinkerton agency helps McMurdo create a new identity. John Douglas, a wealthy American gentleman, they provide him with enough money to start fresh, with the understanding that he must leave America immediately. The surviving Scowrers have sworn vengeance, and their network extends throughout the country. Douglas's only chance for survival is to disappear completely. "I sailed for England in 1876. The journal concludes, "believing I could finally leave the Valley of Fear behind me. I was wrong. You can never truly escape such darkness. It follows you across oceans, through decades, haunting your dreams and casting shadows over every moment of happiness. I thought I'd won by destroying the Scowrers, but they won in the end. They turned me into a haunted man who could never know peace. So, tell me, Detective, was McMurdo a hero for infiltrating the Scowrers and bringing them to justice, or did his deception and participation in their crimes, even as a means to gather evidence, compromise his own morality? And knowing what you know now about the organization's brutality, can you blame Ted Baldwin for pursuing vengeance across decades and an ocean? The Valley of Fear reveals itself as more than a place. It's a state of being, a shadow that falls over those who witness true evil and can never escape its memory. Jack McMurdo destroyed the Scowrers' empire, but they destroyed his peace of mind forever. 20 years later, when Ted Baldwin finally tracked him to Burlstone Manor, it was the inevitable conclusion to a tragedy that began in those coal mines of Pennsylvania. The greatest irony is that McMurdo's heroism, his courage in gathering evidence and testifying against murderers, is what ultimately forced him to fake his own death decades later. By saving countless lives in Vermissa Valley, he condemned himself to a lifetime of fear and an identity built on lies. Sometimes the cost of doing right is higher than anyone should have to pay,